Her face, you should have seen it. It went from that infuriatingly smug holier-than-thou superiority she always wore, straight to sheet-white panic in less than 5 seconds. Right there. In front of the entire General Student Assembly, faculty advisors, everyone. That precise moment was when Chloe Saunders, our campus's self-appointed queen of woke correctness, the one who preached inclusivity while wielding accusations like weapons, finally realized her little empire, built on empty buzzwords and, as it turned out, stolen student fees, was spectacularly crashing down around her. And it was all because she and her little council of virtue-signaling tyrants made the mistake of banning my history club for being problematic. They thought we'd just roll over. They thought wrong. They poked the bear, and I was about to make sure they paid the price for their breathtaking hypocrisy. Before Chloe and her woke brigade decided to turn my life upside down, things were pretty simple. I'm Mark, just a regular guy navigating my 3rd year as a history major. Like most students, my life revolved around lectures, way too much reading, cramming for exams, and trying to maintain some semblance of a social life. I wasn't involved in campus politics, didn't really care for the endless drama or the ideological battles that seemed to flare up constantly in the student union. I'm more of a live and let live kind of person. Common sense usually works best, you know? My real passion, the thing that got me genuinely excited outside of hitting the books, was the Historical Debate Society. Yeah, I know, sounds super nerdy, but for me and the couple dozen members, it was our haven. We weren't activists pushing an agenda, we were just genuinely fascinated by the past. All of it. The good, the bad, the messy, the complicated. We'd dive into everything from the Punic Wars to the intricacies of feudalism, analyzing different perspectives, honing our arguments based on historical evidence. It was about intellectual curiosity, critical thinking, learning from history rather than trying to sanitize it or judge it solely by today's ever-shifting standards. We operated quietly, mostly keeping to ourselves in an old seminar room, content to explore the vastness of human history without needing to make a statement. Our campus, though, was definitely feeling the pressure of the times. You couldn't walk 10 feet without hearing terms like microaggression, lived experience, problematic, or trigger warning. The student council in particular seemed absolutely obsessed with this stuff. They controlled the purse strings for all student clubs, allocating funds from the mandatory fees we all paid, and they used that power to promote a very specific, very rigid worldview. We mostly ignored them, submitted our basic paperwork, and hoped they'd ignore us too. Our approach was simple: study the past honestly. That apparently made us non-woke, by default in their eyes, I guess because we cared more about historical accuracy than ideological purity tests. Life was predictable, manageable. Then Chloe Saunders won the student council presidency, and everything changed. Chloe wasn't just a student politician, she was a performance artist of piety. Always draped in layers of ethically sourced, deliberately mismatched clothing, clutching her reusable bamboo coffee cup like a holy relic, trailed by a few devoted followers who mirrored her solemn nods and pronouncements. She had this way of speaking, slow, deliberate, dripping with a kind of condescending empathy that made your skin crawl. Every other sentence was loaded with academic jargon about systemic oppression, intersectionality, and decolonizing spaces, often delivered with a serene little smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Those eyes, they held a flicker of something cold, dismissive, especially when someone dared to voice an opinion that deviated even slightly from her approved script. I'd seen her shut down conversations in the cafeteria, branding perfectly reasonable questions as violent or harmful, effectively silencing anyone who wasn't part of her echo chamber. My first direct taste of her reign came about 2 months after she took office. Our club wanted to bring in a guest speaker, Dr. Peterson, a retired but well-respected historian known for his nuanced work on the European Enlightenment. Nothing controversial, just solid academic discussion. We submitted the standard funding request. A week later, I get an email summoning me to the student council office. The air conditioning was blasting, but the atmosphere felt stifling. Chloe sat behind the main desk, flanked by 2 of her lieutenants, Liam and Jessica. Her smile was wide but utterly devoid of warmth. "Mark," she began, her voice like smooth, poisoned honey, "we received your request regarding Dr. Peterson." I nodded, waiting for the usual bureaucratic hurdles. "We, the council, have some reservations." "Reservations? About what?" "His area of focus, the Enlightenment," Chloe continued, steepling her fingers, while historically present, carries a significant amount of embedded colonialist and patriarchal baggage. Inviting him could inadvertently create an unsafe environment for students whose lived experiences contradict those dominant, frankly problematic narratives. I was floored. He's a historian, I managed, trying to keep the disbelief out of my voice. He analyzes the period, the good and the bad. Isn't that what learning is about? Chloe tilted her head, her expression morphing into one of pitying concern. Mark, we must prioritize impact over intent. The potential for harm is something we take very seriously. Perhaps your club could explore a topic that better reflects our university's commitment to diversity and uplifting marginalized voices. They didn't explicitly say no, not yet. But the message hung heavy in the air: conform or face consequences. I left that office feeling a knot tighten in my gut. This wasn't about student safety, it was about ideological control, wielded with a serene smile and veiled threats. A chill ran down my spine. This was only the start. After the funding discussion, things definitely got colder. We decided to ditch the Enlightenment speaker idea. It wasn't worth the looming battle, we thought naively. Instead, we planned a debate series on medieval economic systems. Surely that was safe? Apparently not. Suddenly, our regular room booking requests started getting misplaced, or encountering last-minute scheduling conflicts that forced us to scramble for alternative spaces, sometimes ending up in cramped, noisy corners of the student union basement. Then came the observers. Liam, Chloe's ever-present right-hand man with the perpetually judgmental expression behind his thick glasses, started showing up at our meetings. He wouldn't say anything during the debates, just sit in the back, scribbling furiously in a little black notebook. It was unnerving. After one session where we discussed the decline of the Hanseatic League, he cornered me by the door. "Mark," he said, his tone low and serious. Tonight's discussion lacked a certain critical lens. Focusing solely on trade routes and guild politics without acknowledging the inherent power imbalances and exploitative structures. It felt incomplete. Exclusionary even. I just stared at him. "Liam, we were discussing historical trade confederations from the 14th century based on the available economic data and chronicles." He sighed dramatically, shaking his head as if burdened by my ignorance. "Perhaps mandatory sensitivity training would benefit your members. The Council offers several workshops focused on decentering privilege and recognizing systemic harm. We could potentially mandate attendance for club leaders." Mandate? My frustration, which had been simmering, started to boil. Sensitivity training for discussing medieval trade? This was beyond absurd. It was intimidation disguised as helpfulness. "I appreciate the offer, Liam," I said, trying to keep my voice level, "but I think our members are capable of handling historical texts." He just gave me another pitying look and walked away. I felt like I was losing my mind. Every interaction with the council felt like navigating a minefield blindfolded. The rules were constantly shifting, the accusations vague but menacing. What was problematic today might be fine tomorrow, or vice versa, depending entirely on their whims. I confided in Sarah, our club's VP. She was equally exasperated. "It's like they want to find fault, Mark," she said, running a hand through her hair distractedly. "They twist everything. How are we supposed to discuss any history if the mere mention of conflict or differing power structures is suddenly off-limits?" I brought it up with Dr. Evans, our faculty advisor. He listened patiently, swirling the coffee in his mug. He understood the academic side, the importance of open inquiry. But he was also pragmatic. "Be careful, Mark," he warned, his expression serious. "Chloe Saunders and her group have consolidated a lot of power. They control significant student funds, and the administration generally prefers to let student government handle student affairs unless there's a major scandal. Challenging them directly could backfire." His words, meant as caution, only fueled my indignation. Backfire? For what? For wanting to discuss history without being accused of thought crimes? The simple pleasure of our club meetings was evaporating, replaced by a constant, low-grade anxiety. We weren't just discussing the past anymore. We were constantly looking over our shoulders, wondering when the next accusation would drop. The air felt thick with manufactured offense, and a growing sense of dread told me the worst was yet to come. They weren't just observing anymore, they were building a case. And then the axe fell. It arrived not with a bang, but with the sterile ping of an email notification late one Tuesday afternoon. Subject: Official notice regarding historical debate society status. My blood turned to ice before I even opened it. Inside, the carefully worded bureaucratic language delivered the death blow. Following a review of recent activities and multiple reports raising concerns about alignment with university values of inclusivity, safety, and equity, the Student Council has voted to immediately suspend all activities of the Historical Debate Society pending a full investigation into potentially problematic conduct and discourse. Suspended. Just like that. No specific incidents cited, no chance to respond, just vague, unsubstantiated accusations, multiple reports, that I knew deep in my gut, originated entirely from Chloe's clique. Our funding was frozen, our room bookings cancelled, our club effectively wiped off the campus map. A wave of fury washed over me, so intense it made my hands shake. Problematic conduct? Discourse? We debated historical events. We analyzed primary sources. How the hell was that unsafe or inequitable? It was a blatant, transparent power grab disguised in the language of social justice. I immediately texted the club members, calling for an emergency off-campus meeting at a nearby pizza place that evening. The mood was grim. People were angry, confused, scared, and utterly demoralized. This is unbelievable. Ben, usually the most level-headed debater, slammed his fist on the table. They shut us down based on nothing. It's pure censorship. But what can we possibly do? Asked Maria, her voice trembling slightly. They're the Student Council. They have all the power. Appealing to them is useless. She was right. Appealing to Chloe and her cronies would be like asking a wolf to guard the sheep. And Dr. Evans' warning about the administration's reluctance to intervene echoed in my mind. Chloe had built her fortress well, armoring it with layers of woke jargon that deflected any criticism. Question her methods and you weren't just disagreeing, you were attacking safety, equity, inclusion itself. You were branded the villain. Listening to my friends, seeing their frustration and helplessness mirror my own, something inside me shifted. The anger didn't cool, it solidified into cold, hard resolve. This wasn't just about saving our nerdy history club anymore. This was about the sickening abuse of power, the blatant hypocrisy of people preaching tolerance while ruthlessly silencing anyone who didn't parrot their exact ideology. Chloe wasn't protecting students, she was protecting her own authority and ego, using student fees, our fees, to do it. No, I said, cutting through the despairing chatter. My voice came out low but firm, cutting through the noise. We are not done. They think they've won by shutting us down quietly. They think we'll just disappear. I looked around the table, meeting everyone's eyes. They're wrong. They attacked us with whispers and bureaucratic bullshit. We're going to fight back with facts. A new purpose settled over me. If they wanted to play dirty, fine. But I wasn't playing their game anymore. I was going to find out what secrets Chloe Saunders and her student council were hiding behind their carefully constructed facade of virtue. I had a strong suspicion their progressive purity wouldn't stand up to a little scrutiny. It was time to stop debating history and start digging into the present. It was time to expose the rot. My investigation started cautiously. I couldn't afford to be obvious. Chloe had informants everywhere, eager to report any sign of resistance. My first target, the money. The Student Council controlled a substantial budget funded by mandatory student activity fees. Where did it all actually go? Their website had a section for meeting minutes and budget reports, but they were buried deep, often months out of date and deliberately vague. Line items like programmatic support or community outreach initiatives told you absolutely nothing. I spent hours hunched over my laptop, fueled by cheap coffee and simmering resentment, sifting through poorly scanned PDFs. At first, it was just tedious. Standard expenses for pizza parties, office supplies, printing flyers. But then patterns started to emerge. Certain vendors, especially for catering and workshop supplies, appeared repeatedly, often with invoices that seemed significantly higher than market rates. There were surprisingly large sums allocated to leadership development travel and conference fees, usually coinciding with long weekends or semester breaks, but with scant details about the actual events attended. One item caught my eye, a 3-day student leadership empowerment retreat held off campus. The dates lined up perfectly with a major music festival happening several hours away. Coincidence? Maybe. but it felt fishy. I needed more than summaries. I needed invoices, receipts, expense reports, the kind of detailed records they didn't make public. My mind went to David Shin. He'd been the council treasurer for about 6 months the previous year before suddenly resigning, citing vague personal reasons. David was a quiet accounting major, definitely not one of Chloe's disciples. I tracked him down in a quiet corner of the library, buried under textbooks. David? Hey, Mark Davies. From the, formerly active Historical Debate Society. He looked up, startled, then recognition dawned, followed by caution. Oh hey Mark. Man, I heard about your club. That's messed up. Tell me about it, I said, sliding into the chair opposite him. Listen, I know you were treasurer for a bit. I'm trying to figure out how their finances really work. Some of the spending listed online just feels inflated. Off. David immediately tensed up, glancing over his shoulder. Look, Mark, I don't want any trouble. I'm just trying to graduate. I get it, I said quietly. I'm not looking to drag you into anything. But my club got railroaded and I think there's something else going on. When you were handling the books, did anything seem irregular? Anything Chloe was particularly hands-on with? He hesitated, gnawing on his lower lip. Finally he leaned in closer, lowering his voice. The official records they submitted for oversight? They weren't always complete. Especially when it came to Chloe's discretionary fund and travel reimbursements. She approved a lot of stuff directly, sometimes without standard documentation. That's partly why I left. It felt sketchy. He wouldn't elaborate further, clearly wanting the conversation to end. But he'd given me crucial pieces. Discretionary funds, travel reimbursements, lack of documentation, Chloe's direct approval. Sketchy indeed. Then came the unexpected breakthrough, courtesy of Sarah, my club VP. We were grabbing coffee, strategizing, when she mentioned her roommate, Lisa, who had a part-time work-study job in the Student Activities Administrative Office. The office that processed all the paperwork for student organizations, including the council. Lisa is constantly complaining, Sarah said, stirring her latte. Says the student council reps are the worst. Always submitting expense forms late, missing receipts, expecting her to chase them down. A light bulb went off in my head. If Lisa handled the physical paperwork, maybe she'd seen the details David hinted at? Sarah, I said, leaning forward. Could you possibly ask Lisa, just casually, if she remembers seeing any specific expense reports from Chloe or Liam recently that seemed weird? Anything that didn't add up? Sarah looked hesitant but agreed to try. 2 days later, she met me outside the library, her eyes wide with excitement. Mark, you are not going to believe this, she whispered, pulling out her phone. Lisa, fed up with the council's sloppy and demanding attitude, had gotten into the habit of discreetly snapping phone pics of particularly egregious or suspicious-looking expense forms before filing them, mostly just to vent to Sarah later. She'd sent Sarah a few. One was a scanned invoice for nearly $2,000 billed to the student council for emergency DI facilitation materials from a company called Equity Solutions Collective. A quick search revealed the address was a UPS store mailbox, and the company website was a barely functional template page created 2 months prior. Another was a reimbursement request signed by Chloe herself for over $400 for urgent office supplies, leadership retreat. The attached receipt wasn't from Staples. It was dated from that music festival weekend and clearly showed purchases from a ridiculously expensive designer clothing boutique called Serafina's Closet, located in the festival's host city. Urgent office supplies? I felt a surge of adrenaline mixed with disgust. This was it. This was the smoking gun. Not just incompetence or ideological bias, but outright, deliberate, potentially criminal misuse of student funds. They were silencing dissent while apparently treating the student activity fee pool as their personal slush fund, hiding their greed behind a smokescreen of social justice jargon. The sheer, staggering hypocrisy took my breath away. Chloe hadn't just overreached, she'd potentially committed fraud. And I had the proof. The game had just changed. Armed with the digital copies of Lisa's photos, cross-referenced with the vague budget lines and David Chen's hints, I knew a quiet complaint to the administration wouldn't cut it. Chloe was a master manipulator. She'd spin it, deny it, maybe even try to discredit Lisa or me. This needed sunlight. Maximum exposure. The perfect stage was just 2 weeks away, the semesterly General Student Assembly. It was the one time the student council had to present their activities and budget updates directly to the student body in an open forum. Faculty, administrators, and any interested student could attend. Usually it was a painfully dull exercise in self-congratulation. But this time I intended to liven things up considerably. I spent those 2 weeks meticulously preparing my case. I compiled everything into a clear, damning file. The official budget summaries highlighting the suspicious line items and dates, printouts of the bogus Equity Solutions Collective website, the damning photos of the invoice and Chloe's office supply receipt from the boutique, screenshots showing the leadership retreat, dates perfectly aligning with the Aura Music Festival schedule. I made multiple sets of physical copies. I also took a calculated risk and reached out to Maya, the editor of the independent student newspaper. She had a reputation for being tenacious and skeptical of campus power structures, regardless of their political leaning. I met her for coffee off campus, gave her the broad strokes, serious financial irregularities within the student council, evidence to be presented at the assembly, without handing over everything just yet. Intrigued, she promised to be there with her best reporter. The day of the assembly arrived. The large lecture hall was maybe 2/3 full, a mix of student council members looking self-important, a scattering of curious students, Dr. Evans looking watchful, and crucially Maya and her reporter near the front. Chloe stood at the podium, bathed in the projector light, radiating that familiar blend of serene confidence and condescending authority. She clicked through a PowerPoint presentation filled with stock photos and meaningless buzzwords, synergizing dialogue, amplifying marginalized narratives, interrogating privilege, fostering brave spaces. My hands clenched into fists under the table. The hypocrisy was suffocating. Finally, after nearly 40 minutes of platitudes, she finished her report and said, "The floor is now open for questions regarding the council's work this semester." A couple of prearranged softball questions came from her own council members, praising their initiatives. Then I stood up. The rustle of my movement drew eyes. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but I focused, channeling my anger into resolve. "Mark Davies," I said, my voice clear and steady, carrying across the room. "From the Historical Debate Society." I made sure to emphasize the club's name. I saw a flicker of annoyance cross Chloe's face, quickly masked by her practiced smile. "Yes, Mark," she purred, tilting her head slightly. "Do you have a question about how the council is working to ensure all student voices feel valued and safe?" "Oh, I had a question, all right." I started walking slowly towards the front stage area. "Actually, Madam President," I replied, my voice gaining strength, "my question is about transparency, fiscal responsibility, and the ethical stewardship of mandatory student activity fees." A low murmur rippled through the audience. Chloe's smile didn't falter, but her eyes hardened. "Mark, as stated, our budget reports are available online, and all expenditures follow strict university protocols." "Do they?" I cut her off, holding up the first printout, the invoice from the Phantom Company. "Can you elaborate on this expenditure?" "Nearly $2,000 for emergency DEI facilitation materials paid to Equity Solutions Collective, a company whose registered address is a UPS store, whose website appeared just 2 months ago, and which seems to have conducted 0 actual workshops on this campus." Chloe blinked, her composure cracking for just a fraction of a second. That was a vital pilot program," she stammered, gripping the podium. "Fully vetted, essential resources." "Essential resources?" I held up the next piece of evidence, the crystal-clear photo of her expense report and the boutique receipt. "Like these urgent office supplies you personally purchased for over $400 during your leadership retreat? The retreat that miraculously coincided with the Aura Music Festival? And this receipt, it's from Serafina's Closet, a high-fashion boutique. Are $400 designer garments considered standard office supplies in the student council, Chloe?" Audible gasps now filled the hall. Chloe's face drained of color, then flushed a deep, blotchy red. That's completely misleading," she sputtered, her voice rising in pitch. "There was an emergency, luggage lost, necessary items." Her smooth facade was crumbling fast. "An emergency that required designer clothes?" I pressed, my voice ringing with accusation. "And what about the consistent, inflated catering costs from Artisan Bites Catering?" A company I discovered owned and operated by your cousin? Or the thousands allocated to various social justice community projects listed here? I gestured to another printout. Projects for which there seemed to be no records, no reports, no deliverables, just allocated funds. I walked up to the table at the front and laid down the stack of copies, facing the audience. This isn't about problematic discourse or campus safety, is it, Chloe? This is about abusing power. You used the shield of woke ideology to shut down groups you disliked, like mine, while potentially embezzling student funds for personal trips, designer clothes, and kickbacks to family. You wrapped corruption in the language of equity. Dead silence fell over the room. Every eye was locked on Chloe, who stood frozen, her mouth opening and closing silently like a fish out of water. Her hands were visibly trembling on the podium. She looked utterly exposed, stripped bare of her self-righteous armor. Then Dr. Evans stood up slowly, his face etched with grim disapproval. "Madam President Saunders," he said, his voice calm but carrying immense weight. "In light of these extremely serious allegations and the documentation presented, I believe this assembly must be immediately adjourned." He turned slightly to address the room and the few administrators present. "And I strongly recommend the university administration launch an immediate full-scale forensic audit of the student council's finances and operating procedures." Chloe looked like she might collapse. Liam looked physically ill. Jessica stared blankly ahead, shell-shocked. Maya, the student reporter, was typing furiously into her laptop, a predatory glint in her eyes. As I walked back to my seat, the stunned silence began to break into angry whispers and shocked murmurs. The Queen had fallen, not in an ideological debate, but buried under the weight of her own grubby receipts. And the feeling? Watching that smug hypocrisy shatter into a million pieces? It was pure, undiluted, profoundly satisfying justice. The fallout was immediate and explosive. As Dr. Evans recommended, the university administration wasted no time launching a major investigation, freezing all student council accounts and seizing their financial records that very afternoon. Chloe, Liam, and 2 other council members implicated in the spending were summarily suspended from their positions pending the outcome. The student newspaper, led by Maya, published a devastating front-page exposé the next morning, complete with scanned images of the key evidence I'd presented. The story spread across campus like wildfire. Suddenly, students who had previously been cowed into silence by Chloe's clique started speaking up, sharing their own experiences of being unfairly targeted, demanding accountability, questioning where their mandatory fees had actually gone. The comments section on the online article was a flood of outrage. The official investigation quickly confirmed everything I had uncovered and more. They found evidence of falsified invoices, expense reports padded with personal items, undeclared conflicts of interest with vendors, and a clear pattern of misuse of discretionary funds totaling thousands of dollars. It wasn't just sloppy bookkeeping, it was deliberate deception. Chloe Saunders faced severe disciplinary action from the university. The official outcome wasn't publicized, but the rumors were consistent: a multi-semester suspension, permanent removal from student government, and potentially even academic probation. Liam and the others received lesser but still significant sanctions, effectively ending their campus political careers. The scandal forced the university to completely overhaul the oversight system for student government finances, implementing much stricter controls and transparency requirements. And the Historical Debate Society? Our suspension was lifted the day after the assembly. The interim student council, composed of students untainted by the scandal and appointed by the administration, issued a formal apology for the baseless accusations. Suddenly, being interested in objective history wasn't problematic anymore. In fact, our club experienced an unexpected surge in membership. Students disillusioned by the ideological policing and hypocrisy saw us as a breath of fresh air, a place where you could actually discuss ideas freely and critically examine the past without fear of being cancelled for wrongthink. Our meetings were more vibrant and well-attended than ever before. Looking back, the whole ordeal was incredibly stressful. For weeks it consumed my life. But seeing Chloe's reign of smug hypocrisy crumble under the weight of hard evidence wasn't just about getting revenge for my club. Although, I won't lie, that part felt incredibly good. It was about exposing the rot that can hide behind virtuous language. It was proof that you don't have to just sit back and take it when people abuse their power, especially when they cloak their actions in the mantle of righteousness. Sometimes all it takes is pushing back, demanding facts, and refusing to be silenced. The woke shield turned out to be pretty flimsy when confronted with cold, hard truth about corruption. And the deep satisfaction of seeing justice prevail, of seeing common sense and accountability win the day? That was the ultimate reward.